I quit driving rideshare after that night. People ask me why, and I always lie. I say I got tired of the long hours, the unpredictable passengers, the way the job wears on you. But the truth? The truth is something I can't explain, something I barely believe myself. I picked up a man that night. Or at least I thought I did. I don't remember when he left or if he ever got in at all. But the next morning when I checked my dash cam footage, I wasn't alone in that car. And I was talking to someone who wasn't there. It started like any other shift. Just another night, another set of fares. I drove the late shift, 1 a.m. to sunrise, picking up drunk kids outside bars, tired workers heading home, the occasional sketchy passenger I tried not to think too much about. The money was decent, and I liked the quiet, the way the world felt empty and still in those hours. It was around 2:30 a.m. when the ride request came in, a pickup on a deserted stretch of road right on the outskirts of the city. I hesitated. Remote pickups always made me wary, but the rating was high, and I'd done worse. I accepted. The pin dropped outside a closed gas station. When I pulled up, there was only one person standing there. A man, mid-40s, tall but not imposing. He wore a dark jacket, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He didn't wave or step forward like most riders do, just stood still, waiting. I unlocked the doors. "For Eric?" He nodded once, climbed into the back seat. I started the ride. Eric didn't talk much. Most riders don't at that hour. I didn't mind. He gave an address across town, somewhere near the waterfront. As I drove, I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He was sitting stiffly, eyes forward, shoulders rigid. Like he wasn't relaxed, but not exactly tense either. Something about it unsettled me. Still, I focused on the road, until he spoke. "You ever pick up someone you shouldn't have?" His voice was low even, almost too calm. I forced a chuckle. "Yeah, sometimes. Drunk people mostly." He didn't laugh, just nodded. "Then, you ever feel like you're driving someone who wasn't supposed to get in?" I hesitated. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer, just kept staring straight ahead. I gripped the wheel tighter. The ride dragged on, the silence thick. The city lights blurred past, empty streets stretching long and dark. Then Eric shifted, leaned forward slightly. "You've done this route before," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I muttered. "A few times." He nodded again like he already knew. And then he said something that made my skin crawl. "You picked me up here before." I frowned. "I don't think so." His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Yes, you have." I glanced at the app, my pulse quickening. The ride time had increased. I hadn't changed the route, but the arrival time was getting later. I cleared my throat. You sure this is the right address?" Eric exhaled slowly. "I know where I'm going." I didn't respond. I just kept driving. A few minutes later, I realized something. The seatbelt light was still on. It shouldn't have been. The sensor only lights up when there's someone sitting in the back without their belt on. But Eric was buckled in. My stomach knotted. I flicked my eyes to the mirror. He was watching me. Not smiling, not blinking, just watching. I swallowed hard. Almost there. The waterfront was deserted when I pulled up. Streetlights buzzed, casting sickly yellow pools of light on the pavement. The water beyond was still, dark, endless. I put the car in park. "Here you go." Eric didn't move. I turned. "Hey man, this is it." The back seat was empty. My breath caught. I stared at the seat, my mind struggling to make sense of it. He had been there. I turned back to the road, scanning the sidewalk, the water, nothing. The seatbelt was still buckled. My fingers were ice cold as I checked the rideshare app. No trip history, no completed fare, no record of the ride. I was shaking now. I fumbled for my dash cam, pulled up the footage. Watched myself pull up to the gas station. The doors unlocked, but no one got in. I felt sick. My mind screamed for an explanation. A glitch? A mistake? But then I saw it. Halfway through the ride, I started talking. Not to myself, to the empty back seat. My mouth was moving, my hands gesturing, like I was having a full conversation. The timestamp matched everything I remembered. I had talked to someone. I had heard him. I had seen him. But the footage showed nothing. No Eric, no passenger, just me, talking to no one. I deleted the app the next morning. I don't drive anymore. But sometimes when I'm out late, I see a rideshare pull up to a curb, and I wonder. I wonder if the driver is talking to someone that isn't there. And I wonder if they'll ever know, or if one night they'll check their own footage and realize they've been driving alone all along. Story 2. It's been a year since I rented that cabin. I tell myself I should forget it, that the fear should have faded by now, but then I dream about it. And when I wake up, I find entries in my own notebook that I don't remember writing. I know what you're thinking. Lack of sleep, stress. But what if I told you I wasn't the first, and I won't be the last? It wasn't a particularly eventful decision, just a last-minute rental, a weekend getaway to clear my head. The listing was simple. Secluded cabin retreat, perfect for writers and thinkers. That was me, I thought. A writer, a thinker, someone who just needed a break from the noise. I booked it. The place was small but charming, deep in the woods with just enough rustic charm to be cozy, but not enough to feel old or eerie. A wraparound porch, a single bedroom, a well-stocked kitchen, no TV, no internet, just me and my thoughts. When I walked inside, I saw the guest book sitting on the wooden table by the front door. It was a thick, leather-bound journal, the pages slightly yellowed, filled with neat handwriting from past visitors. Some entries were simple. Loved the quiet. Others were longer, detailing hikes they'd taken or the wildlife they'd seen. I skimmed a few pages, then shut the book. I'd write in it later, maybe. Or maybe not. The first night passed quietly. I made dinner, read for a while, then fell asleep early. No phone buzzing, no distant hum of traffic. Just silence. It was exactly what I needed. Until the morning. When I came downstairs, the guest book was open on the table. I didn't remember opening it. I figured I must have left it that way the night before. But something about it felt off. The pages had been flipped to a recent entry, one dated just a few weeks ago. If you're reading this, don't stay more than 2 nights. 3 is too many. I frowned. Flipping back through older entries, I started noticing more strange comments. Night 2 is when the dreams start. I heard someone moving around, but I was alone. Don't open the guest book after dark. It felt like a joke, some weird attempt at scaring new visitors, but the handwriting was different in every entry. I shut the book and pushed it away. I wasn't easily scared, at least not yet. That night I dreamed of writing. I was sitting at the wooden table, guest book open, pen in hand. My fingers moved across the page, writing words I didn't understand. The letters were clear, but they didn't form sentences, just fragments, names, places, dates. I woke up with a start, my throat dry. The room was dark, quiet, too quiet. I sat up. The guest book was open on the table. I hadn't touched it since that morning. Heart pounding, I climbed out of bed and walked toward it. The pages had been flipped to a fresh entry. It was written in my own handwriting. I didn't remember writing it. I stared at the words, my mind racing. The ink was fresh. The handwriting was mine. But I hadn't written it. The entry read, "You can leave now. I'll stay." My stomach twisted. It had to be a joke, a trick of my tired brain. I snapped the book shut and shoved it into a drawer. I wasn't going to play along, but sleep didn't come easily after that. The next morning, I told myself I was overreacting. I was in an unfamiliar place, my brain filling in the blanks with anxiety and overactive imagination. I just needed coffee and sunlight. I went to the kitchen, made breakfast, and tried to shake the unease. Then I noticed something else. The drawer where I'd put the guest book was open, and the book was back on the table. This time it was open to a page filled with a new entry. 3 nights is too many. My hands started to shake. I packed my bag. I wasn't staying another night. I grabbed my car keys, threw my duffel bag over my shoulder, and made my way to the front door. It wouldn't open. I turned the knob harder, rattling it. Locked. The windows were locked too. The kind that didn't have latches, just thick panes of glass that wouldn't budge. I was trapped. My phone had no signal, no landline. I took a step back, my breath coming faster now. The guest book was still sitting open on the table. I walked toward it as if compelled. A new entry had appeared. "It's okay. You can stay." My legs felt weak. I hadn't written that. I turned the page. Another message. "You're already home." I don't know why, but that was what did it. I grabbed the book and threw it against the wall. The spine cracked, pages fluttering out. The second the book hit the ground, the door unlocked. I ran. I don't remember the drive back. Just a blur of trees, my hands gripping the wheel too tightly. When I got home, I checked my phone, looking for proof that I'd been there. Photos, notes, something to make it real. But the pictures I'd taken? Gone. The rental confirmation? Deleted. It was like I had never booked it, never been there. But I know I was. Because on my desk, sitting neatly beside my laptop, is a leather-bound guest book. And the first entry? It's written in my own handwriting. "You can leave now, I'll stay." Story 3. It started as a hobby, just something to pass the time. I work overnight shifts at a security desk, watching camera feeds of empty hallways, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights. The boredom gets to you after a while. So I started messing around with a shortwave radio. I bought it cheap from an estate sale, old and dusty, the kind with knobs instead of digital dials. Most nights I'd twist the frequency, listening to distant signals, faint music from AM stations, garbled voices in languages I didn't understand. And then one night I found the numbers. It was late, somewhere past 3 a.m. The air in the security room was stale, the hum of the monitors a dull backdrop. I was scanning through frequencies when I landed on it. A voice. A woman's voice, clear and steady. She spoke in a robotic monotone, repeating a sequence over and over. 5, 24, 8, 11, 77, 3. A pause. Then it repeated. There was no music, no station identification. Just the numbers, over and over again. I listened for a full minute before something in me itched to turn it off. But I didn't. I told myself it was just another numbers station. Spy stuff. Cold War relics still floating through the airwaves. Still, I wrote the numbers down, just to see if they meant anything. The next night, I tuned in again. Different numbers. 49, 6, 91, 12, 50. I scribbled them down. And then, just as I was about to switch off the radio, the voice changed. It wasn't a woman anymore. It was a man. A low, deliberate voice. He only said one thing. "Are you listening?" Then static. I turned the radio off and shoved it under my desk. For the rest of the shift, I couldn't focus. The words looped in my head. The numbers stared back at me from the page. When my shift ended, I drove home, tossing the paper in the trash. I didn't want to think about it anymore. But then as I parked outside my apartment, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed the call button. Silence. Then 49, 6, 91, 12, 50. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I went inside and locked every door. I stayed away from the radio for days. Told myself it was just a prank, A coincidence. Someone messing with me. But the numbers wouldn't leave me alone. I started seeing them. On license plates, in addresses, on receipts. They followed me, creeping into my daily life. Then a week later, I was watching the news. A car crash. 5 dead. The location? The exact coordinates of the numbers from my first night listening. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I dug the radio out, twisting the dial back to the frequency. The voice was already speaking. New numbers. I wrote them down, my breath shallow. This time I searched them online. They matched a building downtown. A bank. The next morning it made the news. Armed robbery. 3 people shot. I felt sick. I didn't want to listen anymore. But then the next set of numbers came, and this time I recognized them. They were mine. I stared at the paper, heart hammering. The numbers weren't coordinates or an address. They were my birthday, my street number, my apartment floor. I turned the radio off, pulled the plug from the wall. Didn't sleep that night. The next day I called in sick, left town, booked a cheap motel in the next city over. I just needed to be somewhere else. Somewhere my numbers didn't matter. It didn't work. The first night in the motel, my phone rang again. Same unknown number. I didn't answer. The voicemail came in 30 seconds later. I played it. The woman's voice, reciting the numbers. I smashed my phone against the nightstand. Ran to the front desk, demanded to switch rooms. It didn't matter. The next night, the message played on the motel TV. The numbers scrolling across the screen like a news ticker. There was no escape. I don't know how long I ran. But eventually I stopped. I went home. I turned the radio back on. I needed to know. The numbers started immediately, the voice smooth, familiar. I listened. And this time, at the very end, a new phrase. You have arrived. Then silence. Then a knock at my door. I didn't answer. I never did. Eventually, the knocking stopped. The radio went quiet. But sometimes, late at night, my phone will ring. Always an unknown number. And I know if I ever answer, the numbers will start again. And this time they won't stop.